all members to do the same. Thank you.
Mr Speaker.
I call the honourable member Moana Maki.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'm very pleased to support the Sullivan birth certificate private bill being brought to the House by my friend and colleague Lewis Wall. I think as we went through the marriage equality process, which was also at the Government Admin Select Committee, we really did see the human face of the issue that we were dealing with. That whilst the politics of the marriage equality debate were very real and ever present, it was during the submission process when you had to look into the faces of the families, of the individuals, of the couples, of the children that were directly affected by the change that we were proposing to make. That's really where the rubber hit the road for the committee, and I think even the most hardened of opponents to the marriage equality legislation were moved by some. Mr Rockenboll says maybe not. I think they were. I think that the tenor of the debate was very different because we realised that we were talking about real people. We were talking about their families. We were passing judgment on their families, and it was a very respectful debate. And I think this bill is yet another reminder of how an issue that might seem to be in the theoretical for some members actually has a very real impact on people's lives, right down to the point of the state effectively telling someone that someone who has always been their parent, someone who has loved them and raised them, legally has no standing in the eyes of the law in New Zealand because of the laws at the time that they were born. And so I hope that all members of the House are going to support this particular bill. I commend the courage of Rowan Sullivan and her family in bringing this bill to the House. I don't underestimate how difficult it must be to put yourself up there personally as a family asking for a change to be made because of discrimination under the law. That cannot be easy, but I think that speaks to how important this particular measure is to this family and how strongly they feel that it is in the best interest of their family that this be amended, that this be addressed, and that this bill pass through Parliament. When we went through the civil union legislation, that was really about recognising the partners of same-sex couples. We heard dreadful stories about how, when one of the partners, for example, was in an accident or ended up incapacitated in some way, that because sometimes the relationships with the families were strained, that they would get to the hospital and be refused access to their loved one because they had no legal standing under the law. Now, of course, that's a risk for de facto heterosexual couples as well, except that you're less likely to have a family in disagreement where the relationship is heterosexual as opposed to where it's a same-sex relationship. And the stories we heard were just devastating. Partners being shut out of funeral arrangements, being shut out of care arrangements for the person that they had loved and cared for decades in cases where the family had been completely absent. And Parliament agreed that that was untenable under the law, and we passed the civil union legislation. But it didn't deal with the issue of adoption. It did not. And my colleague Jacinda Ardern does have a members' bill in the ballot to deal with this issue. I sincerely hope it gets drawn and dealt with in the House. But it didn't deal with the issue of adoption. That still remains well, you could say a grey area, but actually an area of deep uncertainty for all couples that are in civil unions. And I think, given how much time we spend in this House and how much time we as MPs spend out in the community dealing with the horrific fallout from having parents not want to be engaged in their kids' lives, from having parents not want to take legal responsibility for their kids, it seems to me utterly repugnant that the state would stand in the way of a parent that says, I want to be there. Of a parent that says, I want to be on that birth certificate, I want to be legally responsible, and I want to be the person that society looks to say you have a role in raising that young man or that young woman. The law should not stand in the way as it has in the past. But the reality is, a guardianship was applied for, and that's great, but your relationship with your parents doesn't end at age 18. In fact, if anything, I think it gets better. It goes from being kind of person telling you what to do and person being told what to do to a friendship, to a much deeper relationship. So I entirely understand why beyond 18 it's important that relationship becomes more than simply guardianship, it becomes legal. I want to end just on this, Mr Speaker, which is, this highlights a very real fact, which is until we get full equality under the law for same-sex couples, there will always be these loopholes. There will always be someone who misses out. There will always be someone put in a horrible situation that those of us who have the luxury of having all these rights just afforded to us on birth, we didn't earn them. Because of our genetics, we got them. Sometimes we take those for granted. But the reality is, until we get full equality under the law for same-sex couples, we will continue to see issues like this, which are very upsetting for the people involved and should be completely unacceptable in a modern Aotearoa New Zealand. Thank you.
Speaker.
I call the Honourable